To kick it off with kind of the obvious, can you kind of give us the top line of what White Owls is doing with Death Game Hotel?
Yeah, so to explain a little bit about Death Game's Hotel, it's a world in the VR, and we are betting body parts in an online multiplayer death game. And the reason why they decided to create something like this was they were inspired by the five senses that were involved when playing the VR, how the headset has a monitor, so sight, audio, sound, and also feelings, or I guess when you're controlling the right and left, you can kind of sense, the vibrations, and you can move along with your body. So he thought it would be interesting to create a game which stimulated all those auditory and the five senses that we have. Yes, and to go into a little bit of why he was inspired before was during the pandemic. So during COVID-19, there was a long stay-at-home period, especially in Japan, where we really weren't allowed to go outside to meet friends or even co-workers at work. So at White Owls, they distributed VR headsets to everybody on the team, and they would have meetings there. So after the pandemic wrapped up, he thought how great it would be for everyone to stay connected, and found how important that was throughout the pandemic and throughout VR. So it inspired him to create a work space, and also just how people interacted as well all over the world, and to create a space that was safe to do so.
With this being White Owl's kind of first formal game in VR, how weird or challenging was it to move to this new style of interface with Death Game Hotel?
Yeah, so since the basic actions in the VR are linked to the player's movements rather than the sticks or buttons that were usually used in a traditional setting, they had to minimize any postures or dramatic cinematic movements that the player themselves couldn't perform through the VR. So determining what actions to faithfully recreate what physical movements was very crucial in this case, and it might even be challenging to create game controls without getting used to these things. So he felt that his previous experience also using the Kinect came in very handy for creating this game as well.
An interesting aspect of VR is that you're often giving players this arena where they can look wherever they want. Was it difficult to realize the world around the player in Death Game Hotel as opposed to having sort of a directed experience where you could somewhat control in previous games?
So since the player's viewpoint is not fixed, it was very challenging to decide where to display game announcements and information to the player. So they are still in search for that perfect solution, and it's still a work in progress. But while flat screen games have HUDs, VR users generally tend to dislike HUDs and all the information when in VR. So they wanted to ensure that critical information is always visible inside the world, but they struggled on deciding where and how they would incorporate such information for the VR player.
And how have previous White Owls titles built up to this kind of new challenge in Death Game Hotel? Were there any notable lessons learned along the way from previous games that were particularly helpful here?
Yeah, so the genre is always different for the games that he makes, and he's always inspired by different things. So every project that he starts and finishes is difficult. So instead of reusing what he knows into his new project, he thinks it's a continuous challenge every single project, and the challenging spirit has been very beneficial, and it shows in the creativity of every single one of his games and his project as well. So to strive to continue to challenge himself and the games that he makes is what makes a SWERY game so SWERY and so special.
And speaking of which, You have such a long catalog of interesting games behind you. Is there any connective tissue to those worlds in Death Game Hotel? Like, will we see any of the previous White Owls or SWERY titles sort of bleed into this universe, or is it completely disconnected from all of that?
So, previously in the White Owls games, there would be a main protagonist, and the story follows the main protagonist, or the protagonist explores their own storyline. However, he wanted to make the user the protagonist in Death Games Hotels, and in order to successfully have a storyline where the user in Death Game Hotels is the protagonist, he had to incorporate what he knows into how to make the user interactive into his world instead of the character that he's still used to making already for the user to play. So to shift that dynamic was a big point in creating this narrative, I would say.
When we look at this game, there's a lot of interesting kind of mini games going on in Death Game Hotel. We see card games, sort of parlor games, and I'm just curious, like, where did you start with the activities that you wanted the player to experience here in Death Game Hotel, like the interactions, the gameplay elements? How did you come up with what you wanted the player to do in this narrative?
So the initial idea was to take advantage of the unique features of the VR games, like using your 5 senses, like we mentioned prior, using your eyes, your headset, your microphone, hands, and create a game where the elements, gradually all of those things get taken away one by one. So using them all, and then wouldn't it be interesting if they started losing them one by one? So then this concept led to the concept of the Death games based on table games. And since they were already planning on doing VR, they thought, well, why don't we create a concept that would never be, that would be impossible to do in real life? So filling goblets up with blood, putting the tiles in, and then it would overflow. But in real life, if the blood actually overflowed, it would be an absolute mess to clean up. So it's a thing that you can only play around in the virtual world. So that's some of the I guess the humor that went behind it as well, in using all your 5 senses in VR and creating a concept where there would be no way you could do it in real life.
And one of the more interesting aspects I saw when I was looking at gameplay of this is that it seems like whether you're going with single player or multiplayer, it seems like it's sort of set up in a tournament format. And what made that sort of tournament format appealing when it came to creating the narrative of Death Game Hotel?
So TJ, to clarify, the multiplayer mode is actually with other players, right? So it's not like, you're going to the top, but for single player mode, it is tournament style. So it is similar. They are both competing and trying to win and betting body parts. However, for single player mode, it's a little different because there's character stories involved. So you're playing one-on-one against the characters that SWERY and his team design, and their individual interesting backstories as well. And you make your way to the top, to the final boss kind of thing. So when considering the story and the concept of Death Games Hotel, he wanted to create a tournament experience in single player mode, and also multiplayer mode, similar but also different. And so the difference is, as I mentioned, single player mode, there is more to look forward to in regards to the characters and how their narratives contribute to the game of Death Game Hotels.
As you mentioned, it's worth noting that you can play single player and multiplayer in this game. What kind of challenges have you faced in bringing kind of more players into the mix for any given game in a Death Game Hotel?
So this is technically White Owl's first time running a program on a server where they had to make sure, or in first multiplayer game, and they faced many challenges, and they needed a lot of help from partners to make this a reality. But they wanted to make a game where 6 players can play together, and they could still smoothly play with nice speed, and also the graphics and smooth gameplay as well. So all of the things that they wanted to focus on in making any game, they had to make sure that this was smooth in a VR multiplayer game this time around. And they worked closely with Meta to optimize the processing power of the hardware for smooth gameplay.
Whether it's like the whole of White Owl itself or just the SWERY brand, like your game designs always have such interesting and odd characters, and I'm curious, like it looks like we're gonna see some very interesting and odd characters in Death Game Hotel, and just personally, is there any particular character in this game that you just had a blast designing or bringing together into this narrative?
日本語になります、ちょっと。日本語の資料だけど、これだ
It's going to be in Japanese, just to show you.
無限ミラーリングが発生している。どういう意味だろう。これで見えます？見えますよね、今。
はい、見えてます。はい。
で、シングルプレイヤーのキャラクター、こんな感じでいろいろ考えて言ったんですけど。
はい。So these are when they were developing the characters, this is kind of their deck in how they wanted their story to be and their demographic and what they would look like.
この中では、僕は、このプレッツァーと呼ばれる、多分シングルプレイヤーで最初に対戦するキャラクター。このキャラクターが YouTuber っていうキャラなので、なんか今風ですごい気に入ってますね。
And one of the characters that he is kind of fond of is Pretzer. So he's the first character that you go up against in the tournament, single player. And he is a YouTuber. So an influencer, I guess is another way to say it, and is very in with the times. So it was interesting to make him. And yeah, he likes this character very much.
これで PV が稼げるぜとか言うんですけど、その命かけてまで PV が欲しいんだっていうのがすごい面白いなと思って。
Yeah, so he's putting his life on the line to create great content, right? So for his music video or his what's it called? His Twitch, basically his live streaming, he would do anything or bend any body part to create good content, which just seems very in tune with today's society. So a very comical twist on people that actually exist today. Yeah, it seems like someone like that could actually exist.
With this being such interesting new grounds for White Owls, would you consider this a one-off experiment for the studio, or is it possible that we'll see more VR games out of the studio in the future? And on the flip side of that, can we expect more traditional format games out of White Owls, or will the studio continue to explore the VR space?
So in regards to VR, he really believes that the possibilities are endless, and there are new games and new genres coming out day by day, whether it's exercise or more social games. So really any storyline that you want to produce and make a reality in the game is possible, and it kind of challenges these new things and new storylines as well. And how the VR set is very immersive. It's absolutely immersive in all 5 senses, which is very futuristic and very astonishing. So it is the new social games and the new genres to look forward to to creating and seeing from the VR game world is I think something that we're going to be faced with, and we're going to be able to see more in the future. So in general, but this is also how he feels about VR. White Owls is currently working on a traditional flat screen project alongside Death Game Hotel. It's a collaboration with Suda51 titled Hotel Barcelona. So this is a traditional and also action-based game. And what SWERY is saying is that White Owls will be from now on using the experience of the Death Game Hotel and the importance and the possibility in social games in VR, and also the traditional action games that they've been working on, and also his previous games as well. So all of those things are going into one big pot for White Owls, and for their next game, there's really no limitation on what they can do. So they will be, there is no one direction that they're going in, but they're using their pool of knowledge from these different games to continue to creating more games and more interesting content.
Finally, where can fans find out more about Death Game Hotel?
Yes, so White Owl started a official Discord for Death Games Hotel. It's about, they've already accumulated close to 200 people, and this is the most interactive area where, you know, devs are online, they're interacting with the fans, and also SWERY answering questions. And this is where I guess the most interactive area that Death Game Hotels has to its users, or people who are interested in the game or interested in White Owls or interested in SWERY. So this is where our news goes, and we also have play sessions that we will have in the future with the devs or with SWERY, where users can log online and play multiplayer mode with them as well. So I guess this is the place to go if you want to learn more, or if you want to interact with others or with the devs regarding Death Game Hotel.